and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. Technological change over the past few decades is having a major impact on our lives. With the rapid growth of automation, big data, cybersecurity, and new markets, the fourth industrial revolution is expected to be a huge challenge for educational institutions. How can they prepare students with the skills they need to be competitive in the global workforce in future years? Joining us to discuss this is Garry Jacobs. He's an American-born author, researcher, and consultant on business management, economic and social development, education, and global governance. Hello, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so I've watched you talk on the presentation you gave at the World Academy of Art and Sciences earlier this year. And you said that from 50 to 80% of professions that are going to appear on the market within the next few decades do not exist yet.
Well,
what kind of professions do we talk about?
This is figures by McKinsey and World Economic Forum, and they're figures that are being thrown around by a lot of people. I don't think we can say with any precision what that actual numbers are going to be, but I think it's indicative of the fact that the change in technology is so rapid, so extensive, that we cannot be educating. We don't know what the youth will need 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, and it has fundamental challenges, poses fundamental challenges for education.
If we don't know what youth is going to need only 3 years from now, how do we prepare them for the future life, for the professions that do not exist yet?
Well, that's the real question, and to us, it requires a fundamental shift in the whole strategy for particularly for higher education, because we know positively that those who are entering the workforce now are going to have to continue learning throughout their lives. Education can no longer be conceived as a kind of a vaccine that you get it when you're young and then it lasts and guarantees you for the rest of your life. More than giving a particular knowledge, what our students need now is to learn actively how to learn so that they can continue to learn throughout their lives. And that's a real difference in focus. It's a shift in education from teaching a subject to helping develop the person, the student, as a learner.
Can technology help with this process of learning to learn?
Well, technology can help. It's part of the answer. It's part of the problem. It's also part of the answer. Because today, technology makes it possible for anyone in the world, theoretically, if not yet practically, we could have a world-class delivery system that offers the best quality information by the best communicators in the world.
What do we need to do to have that?
Well, that's why we founded an organization called World University Consortium, not the consortium of universities, but a consortium of organizations that really think we need a world university. We have the technology for it, and there are MOOCs like online courses like Coursera or Udacity and FutureLearn in UK and others around the world who are doing that in a relatively small way. But that's the technology delivery gives us low-cost delivery of high-quality knowledge at any place in the world, at any time you want it, in any language, potentially. That's what the technology offers. But we know education is not just a process of access to information. It's an interactive process. It's a human process. And the challenges that we face now are not to throw away the existing system and all of the people who are involved with it, the professionals, but to reorient them from being the source of the information to the facilitators of a learning process.
How can that be done? Because clearly right now in Ukraine, the education looks like this. There is a teacher facing the blackboard and drawing something with a chalk, and students are just listening for hours and hours, multiple lectures. I don't think that this is effective, and I believe you don't think so as well. What needs to be done to reorient those teachers?
I'll give you one practical example rather than theoretical.
Yes.
I come from Napa, California. It's a relatively small town in a rural area where we grow wine. And Napa consulted 20 top IT companies at the northern end of Silicon Valley about 15 years ago about how the education should be revamped. And the things they said were, you are educating students for 12 years to learn by themselves and compete with each other. And once they come into our companies, they almost never do anything by themselves. And the key skill they need is the skill on how to work with others, cooperate, interpersonal skills, social skills, and so forth. And so in Napa, we changed the system.
How?
We broke down the classroom. Let me just cite a little research before I tell you how they did it. There's abundant research to show when you listen to lectures, I'm talking about 80 million samples have been studied on this. The average retention rate from listening to a lecture over time is about 5%.
That's small. 5%.
If you read a book, study it yourself, it goes up to about 10%.
Still small.
Still small. If you interact and discuss it the way we are, or in a small group or a discussion, it can go up according to up to 20, 25%. If you are involved in projects or application of the knowledge in the real world context, or even in an artificial case study environment, it can go up to 50%. But if you really want maximum retention, all the data shows, teach others. And it goes up to about 90%.
Okay.
So essentially, we have a system. Remember, it was developed around 1088 for the University of Bologna, 1,000 years ago, 300, 400 years before the printing press, before we had books to read. And we're still using the same delivery system. Everybody who teaches knows that you learn a tremendous amount when you try to communicate with others. So what they've done in Napa is they broke down the classroom into groups of 4 students who are working as a team teaching each other. And everybody has their own capacities, they learn, and then they come back and teach the others what they have learned. They're sharing their knowledge, not competing with each other, cooperating to enhance the knowledge of the team. The teacher is not the source of the information. They've got that on their mobile phone or on the internet. The teacher is a facilitator of that process of understanding. So it's a shift.
That's a great approach.
Yeah, it's a shift from passive indoctrination to actively be engaged in the learning process.
Do you think this method could be effective all around the world?
I think this is the future all around the world. And now what the challenge for the companies that are, the organizations that are using the web to broadcast knowledge is they know. The data shows something like this. Again, I'm just quoting a particular study, that if you learn in the classroom through the normal process, let's say you have a 60% retention rate or learning according to traditional measures. If you simply learn by yourself on the internet, depending on the person, it may be 40 or 50%. But,
it could be less, though, right?
Or it can be much less. But you may not, if the person may not be motivated, they may not be able to do it by themselves. But if you combine the methods, what they call the flipped model or the hybrid model, where the student goes and learns at home, watches the videos or the lectures at home, comes into the classroom to interact, again, the learning rates go up to 90% or more. So I think that actually will be a great advantage for teachers in the future, because they don't have to be this rote repository of information, repeating the same thing. Imagine year after year after year, repeating the same thing. They can really be engaging with the students to try to develop their mind, to try to develop their capacity to learn, so that by the time they get out of the education, they can continue the learning process themselves.
Okay, well, but still, the amount of data revolving around the world now is growing every day drastically. How can we pass it on to the future generations?
Good question, and my answer is we shouldn't. Why should we? Before we had books, you had to memorize everything. And when books were rare and you had to be out in the field and everything, okay, there was a lot of things we had to memorize. But education is not just a question of memorizing facts. There's whole levels of education. I would say facts are the lowest of the levels. It doesn't mean there aren't things we need. To understand the facts is different from knowing the facts. You may be able to repeat them on an exam, or I may be able to. Doesn't mean I really understand what they mean. The capacity to understand what somebody has discovered is different from thinking. Thinking is the capacity to critically evaluate a situation and to think outside the box, to think differently, to question, to go beyond and think creatively, which our present system, we only have so much mental energy, even if our brains have a lot of capacity. When we use all our energy on memorization or even on understanding, there's very little energy left for the creative part.
Well, I hope that in future, the educational system all around the world will get as creative as it's possible. Thank you so much for having such a wonderful conversation and for coming here.
Thanks. Great pleasure.
That was Garry Jacobs. He's an American-born scientist and consultant on business management, economic and social development, education, and global governance. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.